I would like to make a recommendation. I know you had a recommendation at the Budget Committee.
Yep.
I would like to see the TEA, the new TEA representation. So the problem we have is in the contract of our different unions, there is no punishment or no language in there for how someone that may or may not use or misuse sick days can be dealt with. It's not in there. It just says they get X number of days. So we don't really have any teeth to do anything about it. But I would like to recommend that we have a personnel committee, have our human resource department and our business department actually assess the data of who was absent when and why it happened and what reason was given, and then have that information brought to the personnel committee and have them work with the TEA, coming up with some way to reach a protocol for how it gets handled. Because like right now we have nothing. We just say you get X number of sick days and that's it. So we can be upset about it, we can be frustrated about it, we can say, you know, we don't feel somebody should take the day off before Veterans Day, but it's not contractually anywhere. You know, there's no violation of law or contract. But we have a desire from the TEA saying that we have, you know, more than 90% of our teachers are following, you know, good common practice, and there might be a few teachers that are not. And they would like to represent the 90-something% of those teachers that are doing good common practice. And they'd like to work with the personnel committee in formulating some way to move forward. Versus setting money aside, which we know we don't have right now, by our topic number.
As always, the reason this came up was a report from the Personnel Committee several months ago, identifying spikes, you know, in our absentee rate and our sick day calling. Okay, and it was at such a level that it rose to the level of having the subcommittee actually look at it, and it was brought forward, I believe, by your department. Right. That triggered in me memories of, again, 10 years on the board during budget season, putting aside money for substitute teachers, and during the budget committee meetings themselves, in formulating our yearly budgets in the spring, and then compounded when, well, let me just begin with that. And that line item every single year, you know, increasing. And then, after being on the board for so long, being involved in negotiations with I think basically every bargaining unit that there is to be involved with, you know, I've been involved with negotiating with that union as well. And when the subject comes up about sick days, you know, the Board of Education in those meetings always takes the stance, these are sick days, these are not personal days, these are sick days. And the agreement is always, yes, we know they're sick days. But the data coming forward is that there may likely be staff members who are looking upon these as personal days. Now that then becomes a contractual issue. You know, the board is very clear. If you're sick, by all means, for your safety and the safety of your children, take the days off, days, whatever. But if there's a pattern, and that pattern indicates that it's the same group of people who are consistently getting sick on a Friday and a Monday, who are consistently taking off their professional development days, for which the Board of Education is spending taxpayer money to help them become better teachers, then it becomes an issue to me. You know, it does become an issue to me. It goes toward accountability. It goes toward, you know, trying to send a clear message that in an environment of dwindling resources, of taxpayers maxed and what they can pay for our school, you know, and for our, and for the resources that we need, that everybody step up. Everybody step up. And to Ms. Svets-Giuliano's point, I am very open to your suggestion that you step forward as a union. You're new to this. Trust me, I am not, okay? Trust me when I say I am not. And I have been looked at straight in the eye many, many times in negotiations and told that sick days will only be used when people are sick. And yet the data brought forward by administrators and brought forward by the personnel committers tell me that that simply isn't so. And I just feel at this point in time, it is imperative that the boards of education, I feel it's important that the boards of public safety, that the boards, that the city councils, that everybody basically step up and say, we have got to get more bang for our buck. We have got to basically make sure that every penny spent is actually going toward the purpose of furthering that city agenda, in this case, public education and educating our kids. Getting, it is an ongoing, this comes out of the frustration of trying to rethink a curriculum that will really, truly achieve closing the achievement gap, not just between genders and races, but between poor communities and kids in poor communities like Torrington and those in wealthy communities. I frankly have as has been discussed, I have huge concerns about the new core curriculum and what that will actually accomplish. I continue to think about the question John Kisko posed several months ago. Are private schools using this new agenda? Are they moving toward that new agenda? If the answer is no, that should send all kinds of red flags. And so it comes back to my core belief after doing this for 10 years, after being a single parent, raising 2 kids, that the only thing, in my mind, that will truly improve education in any community is putting good teachers in front of respectful kids for longer periods of time, period. And so, I'm sorry, ma'am, but when this study came out, that we were having on a professional development day, this huge spike of people just taking that off, just after the contract with the union had asked for more professional development days, yeah, that set my spring. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Now you come forward and you say you will be willing to, you will work with the administration, you'll work with the board to narrow down and isolate these problems and come up with some effective measures for dealing with it. Now, I don't know you, but I think after 10 years of being a loudmouth on the Board of Education, you know me pretty well. I speak my mind, I mean what I say, and I damn well follow up with what I choose to follow up with. I don't believe in using a sledgehammer when a ball-peen hammer will do. I'm a son of a manufacturer, and I know you use the appropriate tool for the appropriate need. I would personally, now the board hasn't voted on this. This is just Paul Cavanero speaking as a board member, so I don't know where the rest of the board is on this. But I have serious reservations that you will be able to do anything effectively. I know you're new and you think you can do things. I've been misled in this regard many, many times in the past, okay? I would be willing to take that motion off the table to hire the forensic expert pending an immediate discussion with the union and the administration and if need be the personnel committee, and then come forward at the next meeting with some recommendations. I don't know if that needs to be an executive session, I don't know, because I don't know what the recommendations are going to be. But I'd be willing to wait a month to proceed, before actually moving towards setting aside monies to do, And as far as the setting aside money, to me, obtaining useful, valid numbers, data, the first step in the solution of any problem is correctly identifying the problem, Then you can move to solve that problem. If you don't do that, you're spinning your wheels. I've seen way too many boards, way too many government agencies failing to do that key piece of business first, correctly identifying the problem. So to me, the suggestion to hire a forensic expert was to correctly identify the problem. How big of a problem is this? Is this a problem we can get a handle on? Does this seem, statistics and probability can be very, very, very useful and effective tools.
Yeah,
so
we have a ball-peen hammer.
Yes, but I've been working with this ball-peen hammer, me personally, for many, many, many years, and we haven't gotten a handle on this problem, okay?
Well, if we work with, we're gonna have Danielle, Kelly Services put some numbers forward because they get the recording of who calls in, list. The schools, principals have the list of who's called in because they get that from Kelly
Right.
Services. We can assemble those numbers. I believe that we should have enough in-house staff to assemble those numbers and disseminate it into something useful without spending money on a forensic audit. Bring that to the personnel committee with the TEA. Discuss things like if professional development is missed, should there be a responsibility to make it up? You know, that's something that's not in the contract, it's not anywhere, but that could be, that's an open discussion. It was also stated that, you know, a lot of teachers will take professional development days to fulfill other obligations in lieu of missing a teaching day to fulfill other obligations. So if something comes up, they would rather miss a professional development day than a day in front of the students. So, I mean, I have heard that in the last couple of weeks, so.
Understandable.
I mean, in that,
If
but
this-
I think that with professional development being as important as it is, and that we're spending money on it, you know, a conversation could be had that, well, if they miss professional development, then they should be responsible for making it up. You know, we allow students to learn online, should we allow the teachers to do their professional development online and prove with login time that they you know, had the professional development? I mean, there's a lot of options on the table, but before we go out and get a forensic audit and spend the money, which we're kind of tight on, that we give our, you know, our in-house staff, you know, we give them a month to get the numbers together, get them to personnel, and see where we can go, and give the TEA the opportunity to work with them and see if we can come up with something. I mean, if we don't get anywhere, we have the other option, but I think we should try in-house and give, you know, we can make it a board directive that we want it done, and we can say, all right, we have X number of days to accomplish it, let's get it done. I mean, how do you guys feel on the issue?
Well, in-house is better than out-house, so to speak. No, really, we're better off if we can handle it on our own instead of going to the outside. I don't know, if Paul.
Well, we always tried to cut down on consultants.
I agree with best of all, you know, yeah, and I'm willing to accept, again, what I've seen in years when this discussion comes up, why are we spending so much? Why have we tapped out our substitute teacher line already this early in the year? It's crazy. Why? Well, because a lot of people are taking time off. Why? We don't know. And what I've gotten from administrators, quite frankly, not you, Cheryl, you haven't been through this, but you know, there's been 5 or 6 others in my life prior to you, and I get a shrug of the shoulders, like, you know, just the way it is. And I'm just tired of the way it is. If this discussion and this option on the floor of possibly hiring a forensic expert forces the union and forces the administrators and forces this department, and forces the personnel committee to finally take a look at this and say, you know, we're serious about true accountability here for these kinds of days. Now, sick days are sick days. If you want to negotiate these as personal days, then fine. Then we'll move to that discussion during the next round of contract talks. But at this point, there's sick days, and let's have a really honest discussion and get some improvement here. You know?
Work with the TE. I mean, we have an attendance policy for students. We do not have an attendance policy for staff.
Yeah, and as part of that discussion, quite
So
frankly, I'd like
do
to
we-
see rolled in,
do
what
we
is the
set up an
effectiveness?
attendance policy for staff out of that? Carl, you okay?
I was just gonna add, would it be possible as part of the data crunching to see what other school systems of similar size, what their rate of teachers calling in sick and that type of thing looks like? Just to see a comparison to, are we the anomaly, are we the norm, is it a problem everywhere? I'd like to see the comparison.
No, that's good. That's again.
Yeah, I've talked about this for several years as far as looking at attendance data that we look at as students, and then we also see the monthly attendance of faculty. And my question for the last several years is, why is it at certain periods of the year when you think attendance would be rising, attendance in faculty seems to go down? The real issue to me is, you say we don't have an attendance policy. We have, it's a state law that says we have to provide 15 sick days to teachers. What's the definition? Yeah, it's not negotiable. I mean, I wanted it to be negotiable, but I was told that teachers have by Mr. Jocelyn, maybe you can.
I'm not aware of any law that sets a number to the number of sick days that teachers have, although the legislature did pick it up for, as some small business owners know, as the need to provide sick days to all workers, but there's never been a number attached to that I'm aware of.
I asked this question and I was told by board's attorney that the state mandates that teachers have 15 sick days per year. You cannot negotiate away those 15 sick days.
We can get in, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
That being, well, then it's awfully interesting that I was told that it was not negotiable because it was state law. So that brings up another issue. If it was negotiable, why do we give them 15 sick days and don't negotiate it? But the question is, what defines a sick day? It seems like some teachers I talk to feel that the sick day is really more of a quasi-personal day. I'm giving it. It's something that we bargained, that's in our contract. I'm entitled to these days. I should be able to take them. If I want to bank them, that's another option. But otherwise, they're really days that I'm entitled to. I don't think that's what they're entitled to by law. I don't think they're entitled to have sick days to be able to unilaterally be taken at their discretion. That raises the last issue that concerns me the most about this discussion is I would like to see the school system operate under an honor code system where people actually, as you see in many academic institutions, the service academies, they abide by an honor code system. I think that's how we should be thinking in terms of respect with a professional group such as teachers, an honor code system, and that if teachers don't understand that that's how this system, public education, has to work, and it's not going to be this cat and mouse game, then we need to raise the discussion to just what it means to be a professional teacher and what it means to act in a professionally responsible manner. Have that type of honor where you take it upon yourself to do what's right. And to take days that you're not sick violates that whole trust that we have in public education with the most important asset that is provided, which is the teachers. And for a few of them to dishonor their own profession,
I think the first thing we need to do is get the data and see if there is, as Paul's asked for, is see if there is a pattern, identify the areas that there's a pattern. If it is random, it's random. If there's a pattern, it's a pattern. Then we have to come up with a way to deal with that pattern. We are only talking, if you break it down, you're talking about approximately 10% of the faculty population that we're discussing. We're not discussing 90% of the population, we're discussing 10.
Right.
So when we do see, if we do get the data and there's a pattern, then we work with the TEA as to how to address that pattern.
Yeah, for the record, I'd like to note that I'm well aware of that fact, and one of the things that I think in identifying correctly the problem is trying to offset what is in the public's mind. I also hate the fact that in this discussion over the last several years that's been growing and growing and growing about the failure of public education, it's constantly the teachers, the teachers, the teachers. I have very different thoughts about that. I think by and large the teachers are, as a group, highly responsible, very effective, and true professionals in their field. Yet they do get painted with a broad brushstroke because of, it's probably the same small group that consistently, just fails to perform at a professional level, and that's what the parents see, and then they start talking, and that's what the the public wants to hear, and then it's always the finger pointing, the teachers, which to me, again, is BS. It gets even to this new, again, core curriculum rollout, which seems to really put, evaluating the teachers as the core problem, and I have serious doubts about that too. Serious doubts about that too.
So you're okay with
Yeah.
moving
Yes.
this in-house,
Yeah,
giving
absolutely.
it a defined time period to have
Absolutely.
in-house, get it,
Absolutely.
work through them, get some proposals back next month?
Yeah.
You okay?
Yes,
I
sir.
just want to say one other thing. As a group that should consider themselves as professional, they should be self-policing themselves. And if we just say, well, it's only 2%, 5%, well, if you live by an honor code system and they self-police themselves, they should be dealing with this problem so as not to create this adversarial climate where they're implying the board's out to try to get them. No, we're not trying to. The board isn't out there trying to get them. We're just trying to honor our own contracts that we negotiate with them in good faith, and they have to take some responsibility as the professional group they are to self-police themselves in this matter.
But that could be part of this, Andrew. I mean, in fairness to the TEA, they don't get the data. They don't get a report from Kelly Services that tells them who was out. That's not a report that's sent to them. Maybe in going through this process, we set up something that the leadership of the TEA gets the report of who's absent, who's chronically absent, who misses ironically every third Friday. That's information they don't have because, they're semi-volunteering like we are, where they're in a classroom, in a building, doing their job. They're not necessarily, in the main office getting data on a daily basis. So we have the data.
We've had the data since I've been on the board, and I've been talking about this issue.
But we don't share that data necessarily with the TEA. So but in going through the personnel committee or a subcommittee, we can come up with a process, a protocol of how to do it. And if we deal with it in-house and we set up, this is, it's going to be handled A, B, C, D. If it's not handled that way, then we have something to fall back on. Right now, we have nothing other than conversation.
Right, and a final point, I'd just like to bring this up, in the spirit of fairness, I would like to have that same data, look at the same data for
Yeah.
all of our staff.
Yes,
I'd like to
it
look
has
at
to be
management,
looked
I'd
at
like to look
every-
at administrators, I'd like to look at everybody, okay?
Yeah, it definitely has to be. It's not, we shouldn't single one out,
Just for the record, as chair of personnel, we get that data since I started asking for these reports. We get it for all units. So we get it for maintenance, nurses, secretaries, paras, administrators, teachers.
Yeah, I think your committee's done a great job with this, and I just.
So we have
there
3
needs to
months
be
worth
some
of data and
resolution to this. And I also definitely agree, specifically because this is kudos to Ms. Clacko. I know she's very, very serious about improving the school district. And I have confidence that, as opposed to other times in the past, when this attempt to deal with it in-house has gone through the motions, all that remained at the end of those discussions were motions. So,
Speaking of motions,
yeah,
would
motions.
you like to make a motion for a board directive for the
Do we need it?
administrator? We don't really need it, we can just say we want it done. Okay.
No? Well, if you want to poll the board, just general.
Well, I think we just did. I mean, it seemed everybody on this side and
Yeah.
right around was okay with, taking it in-house and coming up with a
Proposal.
Can I just get a legal opinion? I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be that form, but just the 15 days that I've had.
Yep.
And like, yeah.
Yep. We can do that, okay. On the number H, okay, letter H. At the last board meeting, Mr. Rivero asked to get a legal clarification on consent agenda and how it is to be handled. I got a very clear answer from Jessica Ritter, and then I got a written one. The verbal one I understood very, very well. The written one, not so much. If there's a consent agenda and any board member wants an item on that consent agenda removed, you just ask to have it removed. and the consent agenda would move forward without that item. If the item reflected a person and you wanted to have a discussion about that person or an appointment to a coaching position, a hiring of a teacher, you would then ask for an executive session at the next meeting. We would invite that person. They would have the opportunity to have it in public or an executive, and then the member would have the right to ask the questions that they had about that appointment or whatever was on the consent agenda. We also streamlined our meeting minutes or agenda here because on consent agenda, by definition, is meeting minutes. So instead of having all the separate meeting minutes, we just put them in the consent agenda now, so that they will.
Oh, just a point of order clarification. I'm not sure, this has come up before, subcommittee minutes. I mean, the full board really, I'm not sure how we can actually approve these minutes because it's the subcommittees themselves that approve their own minutes.
By putting it in consent agenda, you're just accepting them.
Oh,
You're not
okay, all
approving
right, okay, fair
them.
enough.
The way we used to do it was we approved them, which we really shouldn't. We should just be accepting the minutes.
All right,
So
fair
what
enough.
we did on this agenda and going forward is move those into the consent agenda, because all we ever do with the consent agenda is just a motion to accept the consent agenda and move on.
Okay, fair enough.
And we don't put them in until they have been approved by the
By the
subcommittee.
subcommittee, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, they might lag behind a month or two, if, depending on when that subcommittee
No, we're
meets.
good.
Now, we're,
Yes,
Just to go back to the consent agenda, you have John who's resigned, or John who's being appointed to a position. I consent to everything except for the John's position, appointment or resignation. So it's put on our agenda, now it comes up for vote. How do you procedurally do that? Do I notify you before the meeting that I'm concerned about John's appointment, or, because once you do that, then don't you kind of like single out the,
well, I asked that specifically. I specifically wanted to address, because if you held an executive session the next time, you would have to state executive session to discuss John's appointment.
okay.
So the person would be identified anyway in the executive session. So if you say, I have a question on, and you don't want to use the person's name, I'm just going to pick one that's on the list. I have a question about indoor track, the appointment of an indoor track coach. I would like to not have that on this consent agenda.
Okay, even though the indoor track person has a name.
It doesn't matter.
You don't use the person's
You
name.
could use the person's name. If you're not comfortable, you can use the position. You can identify, because this is in the agenda.
Right.
So everyone in town has access to this list. So you're not stating anything, you can't say why you don't want that person
Well, whatever.
appointed or not. You just say, I have a problem with, I lost her.
I would like to.
I would like to ask to have Michael Tyler, head coach indoor track, removed from this consent agenda and made a discussion item for the next meeting. And then we would make a motion to approve the consent agenda minus that and go on. I did ask about the name. They said you can use the name because in the next meeting they would be identified by name anyway. You just can't state why. Get into anything personal. Okay? Go on.
Will that also then provide us time to invite the person?
Yes, that's why we have to put it off till if you knew in advance of a problem, it would give us time to notify that person, have that person come if they wanted to come, and we might be able to speed the process up. But if you did have it just at the meeting, it just gets put off till next month.
It would also be determined if it would be open
Yes,
for
well,
executive.
the person would have
Just to move one step further, did you get into the discussion of just what takes place when the superintendent wants to appoint someone and the board does not afterwards gathers and says, we don't want that appointment or we don't want that resignation? How does that all work out?
You meet as a board, you make your recommendation to the superintendent. The superintendent has the ultimate right of hire and fire. We then say, okay, we did not approve John appointment,
Right.
the superintendent can say, I want John. John gets hired, that's an evaluative tool for you going forward. If John's a disaster, you say, the board was strongly against the appointment of John. You felt that John was appointable. It all rests on the superintendent's shoulders at that point.
So even though the board would vote nay on the consent of John,
The superintendent can still hire John.
the superintendent can supersede the board's consent vote.
Because all we're doing is we are making our recommendation. The superintendent has the final decision. If the superintendent decides to go against what a board recommends, and I'll quote him, the superintendent would do that at their own peril. The next one, I guess I stick with number I, is in reference to a question you had, Andrew, on evaluative. It's a very lengthy explanation. Once again, the verbal explanation was much simpler. You attorneys make it very complicated sometimes. The evaluative is the board. Staff members are only evaluated by the person that is identified as their evaluator. If a board member decides to evaluate a staff member other than the superintendent, you are strictly speaking as an individual taxpayer, and your opinion carries only that way. The superintendent ultimately evaluates and reviews the evaluations of everyone. The superintendent and the contracts from the different bargaining units identify who is to be the evaluator of that person. As long as you are not that person that is listed, or your position is not the position listed as the person to do the evaluation, anything you say in public is not evaluative. It is strictly the rantings of a lunatic, was what he said. Because anybody can come forward and say when they come forward, they can say, I don't like the way, I can't pick on John, so I'm going to pick on Sue. I don't like, Paul is, I don't like the way Paul Cavanero dresses. What's that?
Dresses.
Dressing. You can say that, and that's just the rantings of someone from the public. It's the same as getting stopped in a grocery store and somebody telling you, hey, I don't like the way you guys are doing this. It carries that much merit. But if you are the listed evaluator of that person, you have to be very cautious what you say out in public. Having said that, that's the first paragraph. The next 3.5 pages outline the liability of the Torrington Public School System due to slander. If you get up here on television and you say that Paul Cavanero dresses terribly and I don't like the way he does X, Y, and Z, if Paul Cavanero takes offense to that, he can sue us for slander. And that can get very, very expensive. So the advice from legal counsel is, although it is not illegal for us to evaluate staff members at these meetings, it could become extremely costly for us if it is deemed slanderous. Racist, sexist, or any other of the easy lawsuits that exist.
Does it define what actually needs to be evaluated? I.e.,
You can only, as far as being evaluative, is the performance of that person in their job function without proper notification of that employee. In our case, the only person that we have to not evaluate in public without prior notice is the superintendent. If we have an issue with the way the superintendent is doing something, we notify her, we say we're going to discuss it at the upcoming meeting. She has the right to say, if you're going to discuss the way I talked to Paul Cavanero about his dress, I shouldn't have said that, about his manner of dress, is,
I feel a lawsuit coming.
I know, there goes slander right there.
Just write
Just
it,
keep
Chad.
talking,
Just write it.
just keep talking, Mr. Chair.
Are you recording? I see you got your iPhone.
Hell yes.
I hope you are. Is, you know, we have to notify the superintendent in advance. The superintendent would then say, I want to have it in executive session. We have it in executive session. If the superintendent says, no, just have it out in public, we have it out in public. But as far as any teacher, any staff member, any custodian, nurse, paraprofessional, the board members cannot be evaluative because it is not our responsibility to evaluate.
Okay, example, I walk by the building, I'm walking through the building and I see garbage can, all the garbage has been emptied around the garbage can, and I see janitor Jay look at it and just walk by it. So at the next board meeting, and then the next day I saw the garbage was still empty, and I saw that janitor Jay looked at it, walked by it, and obviously the next day he still didn't do anything about it. So now at the next board meeting, I say, like to know why this event occurred. Am I being evaluative of Jay?
No.
Improperly, or am I just stating a fact of what I saw? It could be that Jay will have a perfectly good reason why he let the garbage stay there. But I'd like to know as a board member, what the staff is doing.
You are not evaluative because you don't have the authority to evaluate Jay, the custodian.
But I have the right as a board member to know why
Yes.
the garbage is
You
being
can ask the
removed.
question,
And
you
yeah,
can
and that's
make a
what
statement.
Right.
But what you have to be cautious of is the liability that you open the board up for if your comment is slanderous.
Well, which is untruthful.
Question.
Yes. And it is-
One, I have to make a statement of fact, and two, it has to be untruthful. So the statement of fact is garbage on the floor, and Jay walks by. That's the statement of fact. The question is it evaluative, and is it something that, as a board member, I have no right to question the administration, i.e., really the only one I'm concerned about communicating this to is the superintendent, so as to have the superintendent figure out why the garbage is on the floor. I'm not really concerned with what needs to be done with Jay. I'm just concerned that the superintendent will, at some point, make sure the garbage got picked up and it doesn't happen repeatedly in the future.
The proper chain in that event would be, if you were in a building and you saw that, would be to tell the building level administrator. If it didn't improve, it would be to tell the superintendent. Because if you're walking through the building as John Q. Public. You don't have the authority to evaluate anybody in that building because by title and by contract and
Right.
position, we don't have that authority.
Right.
So you're walking through that building, you're the same as Bruno walking through that building. If you see something wrong in that building, it is your responsibility to inform the building level administrator that there's a problem in that building. If the building level administrator doesn't do anything about it, then you take it to the next level, which would be you go to the superintendent.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what you're saying. I don't think,
You know what I'm saying?
I don't think every comment that a board member makes about an observation or what someone says is necessarily improper, evaluative of anything.
Right, and that, if you read the unfortunately many pages that he gave us, it basically boils down to that fact, and we're not evaluative.
Right.
Except if we're talking about the superintendent.
Question.
But we don't lose our right to publicly question things that either we hear or see.
No, you don't lose that right, but you do run the risk, you just have to be cautious of, that you can expose us to a lot of liability if something is said that causes that person, undeservedly causes that person a promotion, a raise, their job, because then that person can turn around and sue for slander, for wrongful accusation, or whatever. It just has to be, it can't be a hearsay thing. You can't say, oh, you know, I've heard that, and throw somebody under the bus. If you saw it, and it was factual that you had firsthand knowledge of it, and you had talked to a building level administrator and then talked to the superintendent about it, then you can't even be slanderous of it, because you saw it, it's a fact, you brought it to multiple people's attention, and then it has to be dealt with by the people that you brought in.
I just question when you say it's not necessarily my responsibility, but that I'm supposed to, like, I'm part of this chain of command that I have to talk first to the building principal. I think as a board member, I don't really want to have that responsibility or that confinement to necessarily talk to the teacher, the building principal. I think the only person that I feel that as a board member I have the ability to voice my concern is either directly to the superintendent or to somehow get it on the agenda with the full board to discuss it. But I don't really feel comfortable as a board member talking to anyone other than the superintendent. That's just my feeling about it, so. Does that?
Well, just in the legal opinion that I did get back from it was that when we are out, we're just taxpayers.
Right.
We're only the Board of Education when we're sitting here. So if you're walking through the building, you're really no different than any other taxpayer. And we tell every other taxpayer that has a complaint, if the complaint is in Forbes School, they're not supposed to immediately call the superintendent and start. They're supposed to go to building level administration. If it doesn't get resolved, then you move up the chain of command. So, the key is that, we're only a board when we're here. All right. Any questions, gentlemen? School lunch.
Okay, at the last board meeting, there were a couple of questions regarding school lunch programs. And one concern was that parents and teachers say that a few elementary schools, by the time the last lunch wave hits, there's no food or limited selections for the students. And Danielle put in a call into Christine Wallace at Education Connection, who is responsible for our food program, and she said there may be instances where one main entree choice is out, but there are always other entree choices available. In order to really look into and address last wave shortages, I need the school and the date it occurred so I can check production records and other data at the site. Doesn't seem to be a certain school, and all at the same time, there is no food left is probably not accurate, but to really nail down the issue, I need more information. Currently at all schools, there are always at least 2 fruit choices and 2 vegetable choices, and if both of those run out, they will have replaced them with another choice. The second question is, or statement was, first graders given the same amount of food a fifth grader is given. The fifth graders are hungry. That is correct. A first and fifth grader get the same portion size. That is regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The age groupings for portions are as follows: grades K through 5, grades 6 through 8, and grades 9 through 12.
That was just to get information back on the question you brought up. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
We just received an email that the USDA relaxed those regulations this week.
Yes.
So the fifth graders who are hungry can get more.
Yes.
And this was December 18th, after the last meeting, we got the response.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to our action items. Action item A, approval of the ed specs for the Forbes School roof project. Joe Alicata here.
Good evening.
Hello, Joe.
How are you? Yes, I understand that you also have the ed specs that are dated today, January 23rd, which follows the city council vote yesterday. It's basically, educational specifications for any project, and to briefly go through, it's just an explanation of what the need is, the rationale, the plan of the school being used as an elementary school. It's sort of to substantiate and verify that the project that you're spending money on, that the state will be spending money on, it will be a school that will be used for like the next 20 years. So I understand you probably have had a little time to review this. You know, I don't want to take up your valuable time to go through every item. So if you'd like, you can just go through and ask questions.
We can just get a motion. If anybody has a question, you're here to answer it.
Exactly.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the annual? Second. Ellen, any discussion? Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And we did get approval from the Board of Finance and from City Council to set aside the $400,000 for us to go forward with this project and start getting our paperwork moving. Only took 3 meetings.
And it's from the City Capital Reserve Fund,
Yes.
and the application's going in tomorrow, David?
We'll get it in as soon as possible. We just need to we gotta put a booklet together with all the original copies and everything, so we'll have it all together soon. Then we'll set up a meeting.
We'll stay on top of it, definitely.
Okay. Excellent work. Thank you for going to all those meetings for us.
Oh, sure.
That's a pleasure. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Action item B, approval of policy 6156 on-campus recruitment. Can I get a motion? By Ellen, second by Chris. Would you like to present it to us? Say it.
We discussed it last week.
Okay.
It's just
Any-
what we already have in practice, just putting it down.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None. Would you know on
Mr.
that?
Chair, I'm sorry, we never actually made a vote on action item A.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Could you make a note on action item B that Mr. Kisko and Mr. Cavanero were not here to vote on that? And we'll go back to action item A. All those in favor of action item A, approval of the educational specifications? Same, minus Mr. Kisko and Mr. Cavanero. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you for the clarification. Approval of policy 6102, management plan and guidelines for students with food allergies and/or lysogen storage disease. Could you make these titles shorter? Please.
I'll try.
Get a motion for that?
Yes.
By Ellen, second
Second.
by Dan. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Same notation if you would. That was Ellen and Dan. Financial statement. We have Chris, we have Ellen. Any discussion on the financial statement? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Consent agenda. Need a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So
It's right there.
Is this consent agenda?
Yes.
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 Okay.
I'll leave a second.
Right, we have a motion, a second, discussion. Andrew.
I guess I would like to question the resignation of the football coach, how that works.
You would like to ask to have that resignation removed from the consent agenda?
Yes. I'm
He
not-
wrote a letter.
Well, I don't know, I'm not saying we should discuss it now, just, I thought the process was
Process was
you
to-
remove it,
to
and then
remove it.
we ask him if he wants to be part of the discussion. And I'm on, we just went through all this.
Yep.
I don't want to do anything where I'm implying
Yep.
anything.
What we're
as
gonna-
far
what
as
we
this
do-
is concerned.
Yep, what we do is we take that, we ask these two to amend their motion. If there's a 2/3 vote by the board to not amend the motion, then the motion stays the way it is with the noted objection.
Okay.
Do you want to amend your motion and remove the football coach's resignation? No?
require an executive session next meeting for someone who wants to voluntarily leave.
Yes. Okay. Would you like to make a motion to, a secondary motion to the motion and look for a second and a vote on it?
Yeah, well, I assume that my motion would be that I would like to hold the resignation of football coach.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion? We do not.
Okay.
Second. Second. Second motion. I had, Dan was already a second to Chris. Okay, any further discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, are we on number 3? Because the motion was made
The original
just for
motion.
E.
The original motion was Chris and Dan to accept the consent agenda.
Okay,
There was a secondary motion made by Andrew to modify the consent agenda.
okay.
There was no second for it, so the motion died, and the vote was on the original motion.
Thank you.
Okay? Perfect. Subcommittee assignments.